So let's get into our training for today. We're very lucky to have Brian McBain online. Brian has over 28. I'm stuck in my other screen here and make sure that I get all this right. So Brian McBain has over 28 years of experience in fire protection and emergency services and has worked in all aspects of fire and life safety. Presently works for Underwriters Laboratories of Canada, ULC. See the nice little logo up there, as a senior regulatory affairs representative, where he provides assistance to regulatory authorities across Canada in all disciplines with regards to ULC certifications and ULC standards. He served 3 years with the Ontario Office of the Fire Marshal as a fire protection specialist. I worked 9 years in the fire protection and life safety industry, and is currently the acting fire chief for the township of Russell. He also serves on various committees, including a voting member of the NRC Standing Committee on Hazardous Materials and Activities, TSSA Liquid Fuels Risk Reduction Group, and numerous ULC and CSA standard committees. I don't know, have you have time to come join us here, Brian? You're a busy man. So with that, I'll give it to Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Roel. You can hear me good? Thumbs up. Okay, excellent. So I'll just start by Roel. Thanks for the introduction. Maybe some confusion for our corporation, ULC, UL. You see on my slides here in the top corner, UL Solutions. So ULC, or Underwriters Laboratories Inc., who my paycheck says, we're part of the UL family globally of companies. So that's like standards, research, and so forth. And we're just last June, from UL, we changed to UL Solutions, which is our marketing name or brand name. Our legal name is still Underwriters Laboratories of Canada, in Canada, you would still see our ULC marks, this is ULC listed, CUL listed, and certified, and so forth. So the marks haven't changed. It's just our branding, I guess you could say, is under UL Solutions for the certification company. We have UL Standards and Engagement, which is ULC Standards and UL Standards. They're under a brand called UL Standards and Engagement. And then there's our UL research division or group, which is where the Firefighter Safety Institute is, or the Firefighter Research Institute, and so forth. So there's a couple different research institutes there. So that's basically the breakup of the UL family of companies, but we're still ULC in Canada. So just to clarify that. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about smoke alarms. And what do we have to know as fire prevention officers or public educators? As Roel indicated, I'm an acting fire chief right now, so I do wear this hat at times. And I think it's important for us to understand and how we can educate the public, and even when we're doing inspections, to understand what some of these requirements are and how smoke alarms tie into all that. So some information, for example, from the OFM, which is a great resource. NFPA also has some great resource material. This year I chose from OFM. So just to give a little bit about the risks of smoke alarms, great material to provide to the homeowner, nice little visual where your smoke alarms are supposed to be and your carbon monoxide alarms. Looking at that, this is the minimum code requirement, which is 1 per floor, and then outside the sleeping room. So I'll discuss a little bit about that, and then I'll discuss some of those building code requirements as of today, and so forth. So like I said, I'm going to talk about building code. I'm going to try to go back into history to the first building code. I had researched some information. I don't have the copies of the old codes, but from what I could find in archives and so forth, we'll discuss what are some of the fire code requirements. I'll look at some of the changes to the smoke alarm standard as technology changes, smoke alarm changes. I'm sure we've all noticed that in the smoke alarms. I'll speak a little bit about the ULC installation standards and the ULC maintenance standards, and then what are some other resources that are available to the public educators and fire prevention officers. I'm not really going to touch about carbon monoxide alarms. As a UL, I can't speak to carbon monoxide alarms because that's a CSA standard and they're tested to a CSA standard. So if you ever want information on the CO information or standard, we would have to contact CSA to provide a presentation on that. So like I said, I'm just going to touch on smoke alarms. Okay. So we should all have access to the chat. So what I would like to show here is, or in the chat, where if I built a brand new house today and I pulled a permit, just tell me where I would have to install smoke alarms. So just take 30 seconds quickly, put into the chat, if you opened a building permit today and I built a brand new house, where would all my smoke alarms have to go in the house? So just enter that into the chat and then I'll start going through and explaining that. So hopefully the chat will start populating a little bit. If you're, since the 2010 code or 2012 Ontario Building Code changes, the requirements for smoke alarms had changed on the locations on where they were supposed to be. And that was based on the National Building Code in 2010 that changed. And there was lots of research that was done about how children are not waking up to smoke alarms and the sound of smoke alarms. So with all that research that the National Research Council had done in various countries and testing, they came up and changed the requirements to the building code, which then came into effect in 2012 in Ontario. So as we look at it, I'll just press all the buttons here. So this is what you would need. If you built a new house today, you need them inside of every bedroom. You need them outside the sleeping rooms and then on every other floor, okay? Or every other level. If you had bedrooms in the basement, you would have to have bedroom smoke alarms in the bedroom there also, okay? So that would be the requirement as of today if you pulled a permit and built a new house since the effect of the 2012 building code. And then we know in Ontario, since 2015, strobe lights kicked in. So now we see strobe lights. Thanks for those who answered the Q&A there. I see some answers in the Q&A. So, and I'll come back at the end. I know there's some actual questions in the Q&A and I'll answer those at the end. So. Okay, so let's go back to the building code. So our first building code in Ontario was around 1975. And at that time, homes had to have smoke alarms outside their sleeping area. And the requirement was you had to hear it if the door was closed, and it had to have a visual indication that it was operating. So pretty base requirements for a smoke alarm. The visual indication would be probably that little red light that it had operated. Just the little red light on the alarm, or the green light saying that it's on. So it was just that it's operating. So is it operating that it has power, or operating that it has come on? So it could be the red or the green light. Then in 1979, they amended Part 3, not Part 9. So they got into Part 3, and they said that you had to have a single station alarm to be installed in every dwelling unit of an apartment building. That had to be between the sleeping areas and the rest of the unit, had to be on the ceiling or the wall within 6 to 12 inches. If it was on the wall, 6 to 12 inches down from the wall. And it had to have a permanent connection to an electrical circuit. So they added those requirements in Part 3. They didn't touch Part 9 in 1979. Then in 1983, they made changes to part 3. So all those previous requirements stayed, and then they just added more. So then they said, okay, well, that smoke alarm has to comply with the ULC standard. That was the first time they introduced the standard. It was a 1978 standard. So when they made the changes in 79, the standard had just come out, and I guess maybe there was waiting for certified products and so forth. I don't know why they didn't go in 79, but it kicked in the 83 building code. If you had sleeping areas that were served by hallways, smoke alarms shall be installed in the hallways. So before they weren't saying shall be. Installed on the ceiling in conformance with the acceptable instructions. So that, remember there, I was talking about the 6 to 12 inches in part 9. Well, part 3 said you had to follow the installation instructions of the manufacturer. And then in 83, interconnection was required. So if you had more than one, you had to have them interconnected. In 83 also, part 9, they referred to the 531 standard, 1978, just like the previous, like part 3 said. And then it said installed on ceilings or on the walls 150 millimeters to 300 millimeters. Well, remember before it was 6 to 12 inches. Now it's millimeters because metric came into effect. So the code had to change and add the metric requirements. So they stopped talking about inches and they changed it to metric, and had to be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And in part 9, they permitted, if you didn't have electrical power, you could use building battery operated. In 1990, the building code, they made some additional additions to part 9, and that smoke alarm shall be provided on each floor level near the stairs connecting the floor levels. So they said floor levels. Okay, so on every floor level, so however the building code defined a floor level is where you had to have a smoke alarm installed. Okay, so that was 1990. So let's jump into the 1997 building code. 1997 kicks in and said, okay, so for part 9, you need at least one smoke alarm on each floor level, including the basement. So I'm coming to the conclusion that between 1990 and 1997, maybe there was some confusion. Do I need them in the basement or not? Is the basement considered a floor level or not? So they clarified to say including basements. So if it's defined as a basement as per the building code, then you had to have one there also. So that would be considered one of the levels. Each bedroom is protected either inside or if it's outside within 5 meters of the bedroom door. The distance from any point on that floor level could not exceed 15 meters, okay? And a manually operated device is permitted within the circuitry of the smoke alarm to silence the signal. So the code introduced in 1997, the hush button feature. So if that came into the code, then the ULC standard had to get modified to include that requirement. So it just shows you sometimes the requirements are specific in the code, which then product standards have to get adjusted and updated and then tested to become in compliance with the code. Now we're jumping to the 2006 building code. So now they said that alarms had to be installed in conformance with ULC 553. So they used to have maybe requirements saying, okay, you know, the 150 to 300 millimeters and all that stuff and locate and all that. So now they removed that information and said, okay, it has to be installed in accordance with the installation standard. Codes much prefer to refer to an installation standard instead of having all this prescriptive requirements. So the national code changed in 2005, which then Ontario picked it up in 2006. And I think it came into effect in 2007 in Ontario. Now, for those of you who have headsets on, this might be loud. I was told when I tested at the beginning, this was loud. I'm going to play the sound of a smoke alarm. So the code was very specific in 2006 that said that the sound pattern of the smoke alarm has to be significantly different than the temporal pattern of alarm signals. So if you had fire alarm systems said bells, or would have bells in the day that were ringing, and then they started to move over to the electronic side, which are horns and so forth. So then it was called a T3 temporal pattern that was on a fire alarm system. So the code said, well, if you have a smoke alarm in an apartment in a building, we want the occupant to know that it's a different sound. If it's coming from within the unit, it's the smoke alarm sound. And if it's the fire alarm in the building, it's the temporal pattern. So, like I said, I'm going to click on this and it's going to be loud. So if you have earplugs, please maybe remove your earplugs. So I'm going to click on it now. Okay, so that was that continuous sound, beep, 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 okay? So that's the sound that the manufacturers and the standard basically said to use, so it was consistent. If you had that sound, it was different than the temporal pattern, okay? Then we jump to the 2012 building code, which was based on the 2010 national code. So they made changes to both part 3 and part 9. Smoke alarms installed in each sleeping room, plus they're still required between the sleeping rooms and the hallway. Okay, so that's where the requirement came for inside the bedrooms or the sleeping rooms. You have to have a battery for at least 7 days in normal condition with a 4-minute alarm. This change came into effect because of the 1998 ice storm in Eastern Ontario, where there was no power for long periods of times, and I'm assuming a few people may had passed away in a fire. So they implemented that, okay, now smoke alarms have to have a 7-day battery backup in them. So the code now requires that. So therefore, smoke alarms that you find today should be having that 7-day backup. You may still find some of the older models without that battery backup. But if you have the 120 volts, you have to have the battery backup. Then they permitted in the code at that time is that, okay, if you have these residential occupancies, apartment buildings, condos, and so forth, you're permitted to have smoke detectors inside the units in lieu of smoke alarms. And to do that, they put a sounder base because it still has to make a sound in the unit. It has a sounder base, and then the smoke detector is attached to it. And then they said an alarm signal has to meet the temporal pattern or a temporal and voice. So the previous edition of the code said you had to have a significantly different sound than temporal. The 2012 building code says you have to have temporal, and you can have it with a voice also. The reason was these studies had shown that traditional sound, possibly people were not waking up to, and there was more chances, I forget what the percentages were when they did the studies, more people were waking up to the temporal pattern versus the beep, beep, beep sound. So I'm going to press this sound so you would hear what a temporal is. So again, this may be loud. Okay, so that was the temporal pattern. So it's 3 wails, a pause, 3, pause. That's how the temporal works. Okay, so they found that temporal or temporal and voice, I believe the studies had shown at the time was temporal and voice had a higher percentage to wake people up than just the temporal or the beep beep. So it was the beep beep with so many people, the temporal, and then the temporal and voice. So you may find temporal on the market. You may also find temporal and combination on the market. You should not be able to buy any more of the beep, beep, beeps. There may be some that's still available, but there's going to be at some point that'll be all done. And I think it's June 2014 or 2024 will be the end of all that, and it'll be only temporal going forward. So, and with that battery backup. So don't quote me on that, but I think it's June 2024. Also, with the 2012 building code in Ontario, in January of 2015, we had the part 3 and part 9, where in Ontario, smoke alarms have to have that visual signaling component. Not going to get into too many details on that. There was controversial items about it, because when the code, from my understanding, when the code first came out, there was no combination product. The code didn't say you had to have a combination unit, it just said you had to have a strobe. So in the initial days of the implementation of the building code under permits, there could have been a smoke alarm wired over to a strobe light in every bedroom and in the house. And then eventually at some point, the strobe lights got onto the market, I don't know how many months later. And then you started seeing those combination instead of traditional smoke alarm tied over to that. Okay, so that's what the changes, and now we basically see just the strobe light. Yes, they're quite more expensive versus the traditional smoke alarm, but this is an Ontario only requirement. Okay, there's no other province that has the strobe requirement as of yet. I am a voting member on the National Fire Code, and there's been discussions at the national level to make it across Canada, but no decision or deliberations have been done as of yet for that. Okay, so a little history about the building codes. Why did I spend all this time explaining to the building code? Because as we go through the fire code, we will see that smoke alarms have to be, if you're replacing smoke, I'm just summarizing here. If you're replacing a smoke alarm, it has to be in accordance with the building code of the day and meet the requirements. So if the building code of the day only required you to have one smoke alarm, which we know is not correct because the fire code says you need one on every level, then you would not have to go with a strobe light. You only have to meet the requirement of the day. So we know we need one on every level. So, you know, there should be no house with just one smoke alarm. Now, what about the battery backup versus not the battery backup, right? So as we're looking at those requirements, you would have to put it back in as the day of the code, okay? So let's look at what the requirements of the fire code is. So if we start with section 2.1 of the code, basically part 2 does not apply to individual dwelling units except for sentences 2 and 3. So anything in the fire code does not apply to a dwelling unit, but let's go to what's the exceptions are for sentences 2. I didn't pull out 3, I just pulled out 2. So basically, fire separations, so 2.2, open air burning, vacant buildings, service equipment, installation and reinstallation, smoke alarms, portable oxygen systems, and carbon monoxide apply to individual dwelling units. So I'm going to be touching on 2.13, the installation of smoke alarms, because the code says it applies, okay? Code does have a couple definitions that I thought maybe what we should know. So a dwelling unit is a suite that is operated as a housekeeping unit used or intended to be used by one or more persons, usually containing cooking, eating, living, sleeping, sanitary, and it includes a residential unit. And the residential unit is also a defined term. So it's a suite that's operated as a housekeeping unit used or intended to be used by one or more person that contains cooking. The other one, dwelling unit, says usually containing cooking. Residential unit says contains cooking, eating, living, sleeping, and sanitary. Okay, so just a couple of little definitions. So let's get into that section 213, because part 2 said 213 applies to dwelling units. Okay, so let's look at the application for the installation of smoke alarms. So the section 213 applies to suites of a residential occupancy and sleeping rooms not within a dwelling unit. Okay, 213 does not apply to buildings that are subject to part 9 and does not apply if smoke alarms have been installed in a dwelling unit or the sleeping room not within a dwelling unit in accordance with the building code as it read on April 6, 1998. Remember when I was talking about the building code requirements in 1997, that's when it kicked in for a smoke alarm on every level or every story, okay? So that's why they're saying if you met those requirements of the building code since 1997, then this section would not apply because this is for installation of smoke alarms, okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start breaking up the requirement on where a smoke alarm shall be installed, okay? So a smoke alarm has to be installed if the sleeping area in a dwelling unit is served by a hallway in the hallway. So you have to install it in the hallway. So remember, this is the minimum code requirement. What does that look like? So using the same picture that the OFM material had, you would need it here in the hallway. Okay, so that's the minimum requirement to meet a sleeping area in a dwelling unit that is served by a hallway. You have it in the hallway. Now let's look at B. So the next item under 213.2 says that the smoke alarm will be installed if the sleeping area in a dwelling unit is not served by a hallway. You have to install it between the sleeping area and the remainder of the dwelling unit. So I just found a random picture on the internet. So if we have this type of unit or dwelling unit, where could we install the smoke alarm? Because it has to be between the sleeping area and the remainder of the dwelling unit. There's no hallway or nothing for this bedroom here. We can see the bedroom is right here. So you could potentially maybe put your smoke alarm here, because I apologize, I'm looking at a different screen here. Because it's in the remainder, it's between the sleeping area and the remainder of the dwelling unit. So that's a possible location to put it. So this could be open to interpretation because you could put it over here, maybe. Whoops. You could put it maybe here. You could put it in the living room. Ideally, sleeping area, I would say, is somewhere in here. And the dwelling unit would be if we had an imaginary line kind of thing. So that could be a good little area to put it. All right. The smoke alarm has to be if a sleeping room is not within a dwelling unit, in the sleeping room. So for those particular cases, if part 9 doesn't apply for rooming, boarding, lodging for more than 4 or 10, whatever those numbers are, it's possible maybe you might have sleeping rooms that are not in a dwelling unit. So you have to put them in the sleeping room. So again, maybe not the best picture in the world, but just to give you an idea, this is not a dwelling unit, for example. It may be, but I'm saying it's not a dwelling unit. So then you would have to be putting the smoke alarms inside of each bedroom. So you would see them in this bedroom, there's this bedroom and this bedroom. So it's not a dwelling unit, so you need them inside inside the sleeping room. The last requirement here is a smoke alarm shall be installed on each story without a sleeping area in a dwelling unit. So again, let's come back to this picture of the house. You need them on each story. Okay, so they're on every level, each story, you have a smoke alarm. So you can see here, The first floor doesn't have any sleeping rooms, so you need it, and there's no sleeping rooms in the basement, so you need the smoke alarms. All right. Some other items in 2.13, a smoke alarm has to be permanently connected to an electric circuit with no disconnect switch between the overcurrent device and the smoke alarm. So, there's no switch that can turn off the smoke alarm, so it can only be turned off by a breaker. Or it can be battery operated. So the fire code has to give us those two options, because if there's buildings without power, a dwelling unit could be a cottage potentially, then you can go with battery operated. Or if you had to add smoke alarms in a house, you could go in a dwelling unit, you could go with battery operated. And then it says that a smoke alarm shall comply with ULC S531. So that's where you would see the ULC listed on the smoke alarm, or the CUL listed, or the ETL listed. CSA does not test smoke alarms, they test carbon monoxide alarms. So you wouldn't see a CSA logo by itself on a smoke alarm. You may see a ULC and a CSA on the same device, or ETL and the CSA. Because of the carbon monoxide, if it was a combination, you could have both logos on it. Or you may, a combination unit, you could have just one, and it was tested to both requirements, and we can discuss that. I'll get into that a little later. Okay, very populated slide. Basically, for your reference, maybe this could be more for fire inspectors than public educators, but under 6326, this is for an interconnected smoke alarm system in a residential occupancy or care occupancy under 9.8, okay? Or the dwelling units that are under 9.8. So there could be requirements in the code where a full fire alarm system wasn't needed, and you were permitted to put an interconnected smoke alarm system in. And these would be the requirements for that interconnected smoke alarm system. So please, if you come across that, just refer to 6326. Now we're going to jump into part 6. So we were just talking about, I was into more detail into 213, and we touched a little bit about 6.2 for interconnected smoke alarm systems. Now we will get into 6.331 or 633, which is smoke alarms. So obviously start with the application. So this is for residential occupancies, guest suites, sleeping rooms not within a dwelling unit, and any other occupancy in which smoke alarms are required by the building code. So that's the application for 6.3. As we look at 6.3, numerous requirements, but let's just, I highlighted what those requirements are. Okay, so 632 is that the landlord is considered the owner for a rental suite. So we know at the beginning of the building code, I think in Division A 1.4 or something, it says that the owner is responsible for the code, but for these particular requirements for a rental suite, it's only the landlord that is considered the owner for applying the requirements. Okay, so when it comes to that the owner shall be responsible, it will be the landlord. Okay, talking about 633, which is like the duty to maintain smoke alarms in operating condition. So that's where it's talking about the primary and secondary supply has to be maintained. There goes into saying if the building code requires the strobe light, it has to be maintained in operating condition and so forth. So that's what that 633 is about. 634 talks about the maintenance instructions have to be given to the tenant. So the landlord has to give the tenant a copy of the manufacturer's maintenance instructions or an approved alternative maintenance instructions. So they have a choice. Here's the instructions, maintenance instructions from the manufacturer of the smoke alarm, or here's the approved alternative, which has been approved by the chief fire official. The tenant to notify the landlord, 635, that as soon as the tenant knows that the smoke alarm has been disconnected or not operating, or that it's impaired, they have to notify the landlord. So there's a few things speaking to that. Disabling prohibited. So no person shall disable a smoke alarm. So that's pretty clear. No person shall disable the smoke alarm. Replacement. We know that smoke alarms, we've always said 10 years. The code doesn't say 10 years. The standard says 10 years, but the code says that the smoke alarm shall be replaced within the time frame indicated by the manufacturer. Now, we're looking, and when we look at that, there's probably a couple things to think about. Is that sometimes maybe the manufacturer may put 7 years on a smoke alarm. The standard says 10. It can't be 12. It has to be 10. Could go 7. Could go 5. So always refer to the manufacturers. From my knowledge, I think everybody is around 10 years. I haven't heard of anything different. The newer smoke alarms, as I'll explain later, they have an end of life signal. So once that end of life signal comes on, eventually the smoke alarm will die and it has to get replaced. So that's about the replacement. Also talking about the replacement, you can't provide a lower level than what was required. So there's requirements in Part 9, for example, in retrofit that had required smoke alarms, so you can't go any lower than that. And then whatever is required by the building code in the time that it was constructed, you can't go lower than that. And then I think there's some requirements that the chief fire official can approve alternate requirements and so forth. So just take a look at those requirements, and if you have any questions, just I guess contact the OFM if you need any clarification, or your local advisor. Testing and rental units. So when it comes to the testing, the code says that the landlord has to test the smoke alarms annually and after every change in occupancy or tenancy. So if they're changing tenants, if I did my annual test on May 1st or whatever, and that tenant left in October, well, just because my annual was in May, was part of the same year, I have a new tenant coming in, then I'd have to do the annual test for that new tenant. If the battery operated smoke alarms, after you replace the battery, they have to test it. And if they're hardwired and their electricians are doing something in the unit or wiring changes, well, if you change anything on the circuit, that particular circuit, then you would have to retest the smoke alarms. And basically the code says in order to do those tests, you just test the alarm feature by testing the button. If the building code had required that visual, they have to ensure that when they're testing the smoke alarm, that the visual also comes on at that time. You can see in the pictures there to the right, I pulled off a user guide for a kit of smoke alarm. So all those user guides, they usually come in a box with the smoke alarm. Can be easily found on the internet afterwards. So I think there shouldn't be any issues for a landlord to provide those those instructions. Also, the OFM released that TG01 2019. They revised it. Great guide for the maintenance of smoke alarms and carbon monoxide for landlords. In my municipality, when we're doing inspections, we make sure we give those we give a link, we send the email link to the landlord so they can have a copy of it and they understand what their responsibilities are. So even for a fire inspector or public educator, a great material available to understand those requirements of the code. Okay, so I just finished speaking about building code and fire code. Smoke alarms have to be compliant with 531, installed in accordance with 553, and maintained in accordance with 552, and so forth. So building code and fire code says smoke alarms have to comply or conform to 531. So perfect, the code says that. If we looked at the electrical code says the same thing, that smoke alarms have to comply with 531. The smoke alarms require certification, certified, because anything electrical that's 120 has to be certified. Whereas for the code, building codes and fire codes, we don't say it has to be certified, it just has to conform to the standard. But we look for the certification mark, because how else are we supposed to know that that smoke alarm is compliant with 531? Would we accept a letter from a manufacturer saying, yeah, there's no ULC, there's no ETL, no CSA, no nothing, but my smoke alarm, I'll write it on a piece of paper for you or an email that it complies with 531. So 531 is like, I think, a 200-page document for testing of smoke alarms and the construction of smoke alarms. We as inspectors typically would prefer to see the listed mark on it. But the electrical code requires the smoke alarm to be listed. So that kind of trumps it all. However, the electrical code does not speak about a 9-volt battery, only the hardwired ones. So, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to get at here with Health Canada under the Consumer Product Safety Act says any smoke alarm coming into Canada has to comply with 531. So here we have a hierarching federal regulation that anybody importing under, and it's called the Residential Detector Regulation, has to comply with 531. Therefore, we would always see normally a certified smoke alarm. Some of the names of the inspectors were familiar in the chat there when I looked at the participants. Just as a note to self, if you get complaints about smoke alarms, they're not or not certified, failed to operate, or so forth, Health Canada actually has a reporting line web portal specifically now for fire inspectors that was released last fall. It was very complicated to submit a complaint to Health Canada about a device before. Now they've made a portal specifically for the fire service to submit complaints on any consumer product that they regulate. And smoke alarms is one of the devices that they regulate. So if you're coming across issues with smoke alarms, please submit it to Health Canada, because Health Canada reacts on complaints. If there's no problems, then they're not going to change anything. So if there is complaints, please submit it to Health Canada. And I believe the OMF POA sent out an email, I believe last fall or December, indicating that this new portal was available for the fire service. Okay, so that's Health Canada. Let's start getting into the smoke alarm standard itself. Okay, so as we were going through the building code and the fire code before, there's different editions of the standard through time, right? Standards change through time. So we had a 78, an 87, 2002, 2014. The current edition that we have right now is the 2014 with a 2019. Okay, so that is the current edition, is a 2019 edition right now. And once the standard is developed, then it goes the certification agency like ULC or UL. We take that standard and then we test products to meet that standard. So then there becomes an effective date on when those requirements can come into effect. The day that the standard is published, you will not have certified product on the shelf. There has to be a transition period so that manufacturers adjust their products, do their research to meet those new requirements. And then there's an effective date when the products that leave the factory have to comply with. Okay. Let's understand two types of smoke alarms. And it was actually said in one of the building code editions that you needed a single station smoke alarm. So we have single station and multiple station. So the single station is a device that consists of an assembly of all these electrical components that has a little smoke chamber. It has a sounding device, has provisions to connect to a power supply source. Now, a power supply source could be 120, it could be battery, okay? And it could have leads that are spliced, right? Because for the 120, that pigtail connector that we see, or it could have integral batteries. Okay, so a single station is a standalone device. It cannot be connected to multiple units. So therefore, a single station is a standalone device. For example, maybe just a 9-volt battery smoke alarm. It cannot connect to different devices. Multiple station can be interconnected. And when we talk about multiple station, the building code says that, and the fire, let's start with the building code. The building code says smoke alarms shall be wired to be interconnected. So it actually says the word wired. So what do you do with wireless smoke alarms? So the code was written when wireless was not around, technology wasn't there yet. So that's why we have interconnected smoke alarms with the pigtail. You typically see there's the red and the black, or the white and the black, and then there's going to be an orange or a red, which is the interconnection to make them all ring. So because the code says wired, and ULC, we filter a lot of these questions, we have certified, so does Entertech, so the First Alert and the KIDA have certified wireless smoke alarms. So you can install the smoke alarms and they're talking through RF to each other. So they're all going off, but they're not wired. So they don't meet the requirement of the code because the code says it has to be wired. Therefore, we have to go to alternative solutions, and the authority having jurisdiction could accept a wireless interconnect systems. So, speak with your building department or speak with your chief fire official, and will you accept an interconnected wireless smoke alarm in a house or in a dwelling unit? Our municipality in Township of Russell, we have accepted them under alternative solutions with the building official, and also with fire. We have accepted them, but they have to apply through the alternative solution process if they want to go with the wireless interconnected smoke alarms. Okay, so that explains single and multiple. Let's start looking at the different technologies. So we have ionization smoke alarms. Those are effective in sensing small invisible smoke particles, which are typically from flaming fires. It has a small current with the ionized air and those charge plates, and the particles will reduce the alarm, current, and then it causes it to alarm. On the right-hand side, great material from NFPA showing how this smoke alarm technology works for ionization. On my department, yes, we're a small department, 2 stations, but we still do 30 to 40, maybe 50, if not more, smoke alarm calls in a year in CO. So our frontline pumps have this material to provide to the homeowner. So we provide, there's this one for ionization. There's also one for photoelectric. So the officer can provide it to the homeowner if the homeowner is asking questions about how these smoke alarms work. We have information on the CO. And we also have the customers. We have another sheet of paper that we've printed with the KIDA contact information, the 1-800 number, and First Alert. If their devices have to be replaced, we provide them with that information. Okay, so great material to have, and it's very easy to explain to a homeowner that the principle of that technology. The second technology is photoelectric. So that's sensing that large light colored smoke particles with smoldering fires versus the flaming fires. And it scatters the light, which causes the alarm. Okay, so great technology. Obviously, if you had both technology in your house, then in your dwelling unit, you'd be able to sense both fires. Okay, so it's available, the technology, and that's where how they operate. The standard also speaks about a multi-criteria smoke alarm. As technology is moving forward, the standards have changed. Smoke alarms are getting intelligent, and they're starting to able to put the technology and the sensors inside these smoke alarms so to help reduce nuisance alarms. So basically this multi-criteria, it has the smoke sensor plus one or more additional sensors. So you have your smoke and you have some, at least one or more other technologies. So it could be a heat sensor, could be radiant energy, could be fire gases or smoke that operate together. So what happens is each sensor is set at a level to measure the presence of the product that it's monitoring, and it gets the signal. There's a mathematical equation going on in that technology, and it's determining the amount of smoke within the device. And if those sensors together have come up with the criteria that there's enough smoke, then it sends the alarm signal. Okay, so it would not generate an alarm if there was not enough smoke. So this technology is being used now to help reduce false alarms. Okay, so that's called multi-criteria technology, and it would be written on the smoke alarm on the label on the back if it was a multi-criteria smoke alarm. The standard speaks about battery compartments. So looking, it says that if you have the battery backup, which we know it has to have, it has to facilitate replacement, has to be easily replaced. And if you remove the battery, it has to result in a readily apparent and prominent indication that the battery has been removed. So this varies by manufacturers. For the model that you see in the picture here, you pop the battery out, you probably can't close that cover. Some of the devices, you pop it off and a little red flag pops up and you can't close it. Some of them, you can't put them back into their bracket, into the bracket that's on the ceiling. So the standard doesn't say how to do it. It just says you have to do something that makes it apparent that you're missing the battery. Okay, hence the reason why, I guess, when crews are going out to smoke alarm investigations or calls, smoke alarms are sitting on the counter because there's no battery and they can't put it back up, right? So that's a clear indication that the battery is missing. Okay. Some things to understand about the markings. So smoke alarms have to, on the back of the smoke alarm, it'll tell you that it's certified and everything has all the instructions in English and French. And it also speaks to the date of manufacture. So on that back side of that device, the date of manufacture has to be there. However, in the 2002 edition of the standard, when the committee said that you have to have an expiry date on the outside of the smoke alarm. So it could say replaced by whatever date. So you have to readily see from the outside if the smoke alarm, when the smoke alarm has to be replaced. With the expiry date, if you do not have that replaced by on the outside, either it fell off, which it shouldn't, or as of 2004 was our effective date. So remember I said once a standard is published, the certification companies have to review all the files of all the manufacturers and make it available and decide on at what's the drop date that everything has to comply with. So for ULC, we said, I think it was June of 2004, that all smoke alarms will have to have this replace by on the outside. So if you don't have a replace by on the outside of the device, it was prior to that 2004 date. Therefore, if we're looking at today's date, it's 19 years old. So definitely the smoke alarm has to be replaced if there is no replace by date on the side of it. Okay, so just some information if you're talking, either public educators or fire inspectors. If someone calls you and asks you, and you're asking the question how old it is, is there a replace by date on the outside of your device? So that's a quick, if they can't get up there and take it down, that's a quick little helper to help you. Okay. Just quickly, the temporal pattern, I already played the sound. So remember the code in 2012 said you had to have that temporal sound. It was the 2010 National 2012 Ontario Building Code. So ULC, we made it effective as of June 30th, 2013, is that you would have that temporal pattern. Okay, so the smoke alarms would all have that temporal pattern now. I kind of briefly talked about an end of life signal. So an end of life signal, the 2014 edition introduced this end of life signal into the standard. And basically I just pulled a few things out. The smoke out of the standard, the smoke alarm shall indicate the end of life based on the manufacturer's lifetime, not to exceed 10 years. So like I said, the manufacturer could make it 9 years, 8 years, 7 years, but hence the reason why the fire code says as per the manufacturer. So it's important to know through the manufacturer's installation manual to verify what those replacement dates are. The end of life signal shall not be able to reset after 30 days. So you can keep pressing reset all the time, but it cannot go past 30 days. Took a snippet from KIDA's website, for example. How do I determine if my end of life has been reached? They say if the alarm emits a chirp every 30 seconds, it's either the end of life or a sensor error. If the alarm emits a chirp every 60 seconds, it indicates the battery power is not sufficient to power the unit. An end of life or sensor error will not respond to a battery change. So basically, always check the manufacturer to understand what that end of life, and normally it's going to be on the back of the device also what all those chirps mean. So that's how we can educate the homeowners. Take the device off, read what it says, and that's what the chirps mean. All right. So just to reiterate, always refer to the manufacturer's instructions. All right. 553, this is the installation of smoke alarms. So the fire code references the 2002 edition. So the Ontario Fire Code is referencing the 2002 edition. Our current edition is the 2014 edition. The Ontario Building Code as of today refers to the 2014 edition for the installation of smoke alarms. Okay. Some of the things that it requires versus the old one is a smoke alarm installation and verification report has to be kept on site. If you're doing an interconnected smoke alarm system, you need to do a verification report. So, and I'm talking about a smoke alarm interconnected smoke alarm system as defined by the code, not an interconnected in your house. You don't need to do a verification report, but those occupancies that we need that interconnected as per the fire code. And again, always refer to the manufacturer's installation instructions. Within that 553 standard, the 2014 edition, there's actually a report in the back in Appendix C that you can use, very similar to the 536 and fire alarm inspection report, the 561 annual report for monitoring systems, 537 verification. So there's a sample document that the installers can use for that interconnected alarm system for those occupancies. Okay. Has to be kept with the building owner. The standard is very clear, does not apply, not intended to apply to a single family dwelling. The AHJ can enforce it if they want, but it's not intended to apply to a single family dwelling. Only those occupancies that are going with an interconnected system. If it's in a vulnerable occupancy, you need that initial installation and verification report to be retained through the life of the system. And then we refer back to the fire code for those requirements and how long those records are to be kept. The 533 installation also speaks about a CO. So if you do have the interconnected carbon monoxide alarms, they have to be compatible. So you can't mix and match manufacturers because they won't speak to each other. And you have to follow the manufacturer's installation instructions. And after you're done the installation of this interconnected smoke alarm system, it has to be tested in accordance with ULC 552. This would apply to a single family dwelling in the sense that once the electrician has installed all the devices, they have to test them to ensure they're all working, right? So that would make sense that they would do that. They just don't have to do all that documentation similar to like a vulnerable occupancy group home or something like that. Okay, so now we're just going to look. The standard has a few examples about the location of smoke alarms. Okay, so this is a very common one, and we actually, if you go through the manufacturer's installation instructions, they actually have these pictures in them because it's right from the standard. So the smoke alarms will be located on the ceiling at least 100 millimeters from any wall, measured to the nearest edge of the unit, or on the wall that 100 to 300 millimeters. So that's, remember that was in the building code earlier in the early days, came out and got into the standard. Okay, so that's for the locations. And we know about that dead space, right? You never into that corner, the smoke will not get into the corner. So that's why they have those requirements. If you're looking at slope ceilings, smoke alarms that have that slope sleeting greater than a 1 in 8 slope will be located on the ceiling at the high side of the room, but no closer than 900 millimeters to the peak of the ceiling, or on the wall with the top of the smoke alarm, not more than 200 millimeters below that dead space, right? So we're always looking at that dead space. In that, for this particular case, it's that triangle with that 900 millimeters at 90 degrees to the wall. So just ensure that they're not installed in those locations, that dead airspace. If you have ceilings with exposed joists or beams, you'd be mounted on the bottom of the joist or the beam, okay? If you have smoke alarms with air conditioning or forced air ventilation, smoke alarms shall not be mounted near that supply air duct. It's keeping you at least 450 millimeters away from the supply air outlets. And then the airflow at any location shall be towards the return or the exhaust outlet. So always ensure that 450 millimeters away from those locations. If we ever come up with coffered ceilings, if you see those or that tray type of ceiling, it would be mounted on the highest part of the ceiling or on the slope section of the ceiling within the 300 millimeters vertically down from that highest point. Okay, so that would be the permitted location to put the smoke alarms. All right, so this is where I think I heard the chat was activated. I have two pictures here. So in the chat, remember I told you we referenced the installation standard 553 for the O2 edition is what's in the fire code, and the current edition, which is referenced in the building code, is the 14 edition. So looking at these two pictures, the right side or the left, I just want you to say right or left. Which one of these pictures apply to a smoke alarm that has been installed in accordance with the 2012 building code? The right or the left? So in the chat, put right or left, and which picture indicates that the smoke alarms were installed in accordance with the 2012 Ontario Building Code. So I just see a lot of people are saying right. So the key here, when you're looking at these pictures, bedroom was optional in the 02 edition of the 553 standard, but in the 14 edition, it was required in the bedroom because the 2010 National Building Code, 2012 Ontario Building Code requires them in the bedroom. So that's the differences when you're looking at the two standards side by side, is where it's required versus optional. So excellent, good job. Separated from sleeping areas. So again, this particular picture is from the 02 edition of the standard because optional in the bedroom, okay? But it would be required here in the hallway and also required near the master bedroom and the living room because the sleeping rooms are at opposite ends and they would have to be within 15 meters of each other. All right. Basements, recommended for basements. Again, this is the 55302 because optional in the bedroom. You need it outside the sleeping room. It's optional in the rec room. It's optional in the family room because in the day it has to be just outside of the sleeping room, okay? So that's why when you're looking into different editions, you have to understand what edition the fire code is referring to. And if you're doing building code, you have to know what edition you're working on there, which would be the 14. So now let's look at some of the inspection, testing, and maintenance requirements of the smoke alarms. So this is CAN ULC S522. Again, the fire code is referencing the 02 edition. The current edition is the 14. Even though I say R 2019, the R basically just says reaffirmed. So the Standards Council of Canada requires ULC standards to review standards every 5 years. And that the committee has to look at it and either make changes or no changes. If there is no changes, they're just reaffirming the standard. It's all the same technical content of the standard. It just gets reaffirmed and has another 5-year life, okay? If it gets revisioned, then the standard group committee made changes to the document and it becomes revision 1, revision 2, and so forth. Or it could then become a new edition at some point. But if you see an R with a date, it's just reaffirmed, no technical changes. It's still the same standard. Again, you always hear me say refer to the manufacturer's instructions because the manufacturer's instructions are approved by ULC, okay? Or Intertech or CSA, whoever. Maintenance and testing of smoke alarms. So we have to visually inspect to make sure they're secured, they're not obstructed, those ventilation holes are cleaned. Interconnected smoke alarms have to sound everywhere when you press the button. Okay, so those are some of the maintenance that we do. Maintenance and annual testing. Exterior smoke alarms shall be vacuumed. It actually says that in the standard, okay? After your vacuuming, smoke alarms shall be tested either using smoke or simulated smoke. Batteries that are inspected to verify the batteries are securely connected to the battery clips. The terminals are not corroded, they're not leaking. For those batteries that are replaceable. Remember now, some smoke alarms have a 10-year life and you can't touch the battery. The battery is integral to it and you can't touch it. So if it's a replaceable battery, that's what you're looking at. You got to make sure it's the correct battery type. If you go into the manufacturer's approved installation instructions, or sometimes it's even written on the back of the device, you have to use model Energizer model 123 or Duracell 56, because that's how it was tested with those specific batteries. Rechargeable batteries are not recommended to be used unless it's specifically been tested by the manufacturer, and they'll tell you which rechargeable to be used. When do you replace a smoke alarm? So obviously, if you test it, it doesn't work, then you should be replacing it. If the exterior of the smoke alarm is damaged, or if it was painted, if there's frequent alarms that are going off for no apparent reason, and it's not a result of any type of cooking or steam, then you should probably replace it if it causes those frequent alarms. If the battery terminals are corroded, for that, if they have a replaceable battery, or if it's covered in smoke stains, grease, dirt accumulation. Okay, so if any of those apply, it's recommended that they replace the smoke alarm. Additional testing and battery replacement. So you have to replace your battery when you have that low signal. You know, we as the fire service say, when you change your clocks, change your batteries, right? Smoke alarms shall be tested after a change in tenants. So remember previously it was saying that a landlord had to do the inspection, and at a change of tenancy, the annual inspection, same kind of thing. So you're testing it, right? Battery operated smoke alarms shall be tested when the occupants have been absent for more than 7 consecutive days. I haven't been in my house for 7 days. Why does the standard tell me if I've been absent for more than 7 days that I have to test my smoke alarm? Well, remember when I said the code changed in 2012, the 2012 building code, saying that smoke alarms have to have a battery backup for 7 days? So what if you're gone for 9 days? And what if your smoke alarm was ringing for 9 days or 7 days? It could have died on the 8th day, right? So when you're looking at the smoke alarm itself, it could have been ringing for those 7 whole days. So that's why they're suggesting, you know, you should probably test the smoke alarm. And then if there's changes for AC power, it shall be tested when you make changes to that electrical system. Okay, so that is the 552 standard for installation or the maintenance of smoke alarms. Okay, so it is not in the code for like dwelling units. They would always follow the manufacturer's instructions, but there's parts of potentially in part 9 that says you have to install them in accordance with 552 or 5 S552. So you just wherever S552 applies, those are the requirements. But also good practice for the landlords and homeowners, what they should know, because all of this is also in the manufacturer's instructions. Disposal of smoke alarms. So in the standard, it basically speaks about smoke alarms for households, this 185 kBQs or micro curies of this 241. So Americium 241 is inside the ionization smoke alarms. A typical smoke alarm has 33.3, so quite a bit less than the 185 or the 0.9 UCI. So you can dispose of them in your regular household garbage. And I put a link here in the picture there, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, that speaks about smoke alarms can be disposed of in your garbage. Smoke detectors do not pose a health risk. And the Nuclear Safety Commission licensed the manufacturing and distribution of smoke detectors in Canada. So that's the safety that it's okay to dispose of smoke alarms. All right, this is a smoke alarm that you could potentially see in an occupancy. If you take it off and look at it, you're going to have all this writing on the back. So this is all writing that's required by the standard. In Canada, we have 2 official languages. Therefore, a smoke alarm certified for Canada has to have English and French on it. Again, it tells you about what is the chirping and the LED lights and all that kind of stuff. It explains to you. This one here you'll see is a hardwired, and it also has the interconnection wire, so that could be a multiple station. It does say photoelectric smoke alarm on it. And then that red wire or orange wire, whatever color it is, that is for that interconnection. So you take the pigtail off. If a homeowner calls you and says, I bought a new smoke detector, I'm trying to replace it, and that pigtail is not going into it, it's because it's not compatible. It's not either the same manufacturer, or it's a different detector that the manufacturer has made that does not fit that pigtail. So that pigtail would have to be replaced in order for it to be connected, okay? For this particular one, you'll see this is the battery compartment on the smoke alarm on the back. So it has all the warning about the device, okay, about the battery. And if you took that out, you wouldn't be able to close that compartment either. This would be the certification of the smoke alarm. And what would happen is it'll say that it's listed. We have ULC listed or homologué. Sometimes you'll see the CUL listed is acceptable in Canada. If there was no C at the UL side on the 8 o'clock position, that means it was only certified to the US requirement and not the Canadian, and it would not be acceptable in Canada. So when you see UL listed, you have that little C outside the circle at the 8 o'clock position. This particular smoke alarm is certified both for a single or a multiple station. So remember, we had discussed that earlier, the difference between single and multiple. So for the next few minutes, I think I have 15 minutes left, I think. So I'm going to talk quickly about Product IQ. Product IQ is the database for UL and ULC certified product. Any product that is in certified that has our mark on it is in this database. If you search this database for a product, a model number, and you can't find it, it's either not certified by UL or ULC, could be by someone else. Possibly the manufacturer no longer supports that product and doesn't list it anymore. So maybe it was made 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and they don't make it anymore. It's another model. So this is only for current active certified products. If you ever can't find a product or whatever, that's what we're here for, to help in regulatory services. We can help you navigate this Product IQ. So when you go through it, go to Google or to your web browser, search for UL Product IQ. And when you get there, you will get into this login. You have to create a register to log in. It's free. There's no cost to it. And as an AHJ, you have more features than everyday public. If you check off the AHJ box, you get to save, you get to have save features and so forth and that. So you have a little bit more access than regular people with access. After you log in, so you've created your username and password, you can search by the file number. Sometimes, not sometimes, on the smoke alarm, sometimes they'll say S8619 or something. That's the file number. You could type that file number in. If you knew the category code, which you probably would not know, but you could do a keyword search and just type in smoke alarm, and anything with a smoke alarm would come up. You could type in the product model number, so every device would have a model number, but sometimes model numbers get pretty long. And when we're looking into the database, say it's the model is 1234-256-Y2 or something. So there's these dashes. When you're looking into the description in the search, it may say 1234 followed by an XX, which is any number letter combination, followed by XX, but so there's different combinations. So sometimes it's hard to search when you're looking for a model number. But the best key is either by a keyword, smoke alarm, or the standard number. So you could put in S531 for smoke alarm, for example. Okay, so I'll show you quickly a search for a smoke alarm. All you do is type the word smoke alarm into that search, and then you see all these choices to choose from. You're always looking for smoke alarms certified for Canada. Okay, we're always looking for Canada. If you don't choose the for Canada, if you would have chosen the one below it, that would have been a US certified smoke alarm. So you always look certified for Canada. Once you do that search, you'll see there's 23 possible certification customers or files under that category. Then you click on it, and this is what it's going to give you. This will give you, you're always clicking here on this left-hand side for the links. Then it shows you all the manufacturers who are certified for smoke alarms. So then you might know the name of the company. Oh, it's a Kidde that I'm looking at. Or I'm looking at an Edwards or a Google. So I want to look at a Google device. So I click on this left-hand side, and now it'll give me, what is this description? So these are all the models, single, multiple station, and so forth. It's a 3 AA batteries. It has an RF transmitter receiver, wireless multiple station connections, suitable for mounting on a surface mounted box. And the key part here is, you may not have known who Google was, but you know who Nest is, the brand. So Google owns Nest. So they use the trademark Nest. I think Google bought Nest a couple of years ago, I forget when. So you'll see Nest on it. You may not see Google on it. So that'll just gives you a little bit of information on how you search our database. So just to review what we have covered. So we reviewed the building codes. I talked a little bit about, I guess these are resources that are available for us. More than what I covered is what we covered today. But so we're looking at the building code and the fire code requirements. The OFM, NFPA websites have lots of information available for smoke alarms. We have the old maintenance of smoke alarms, the TG0498. I should have put the newer one in, TG01 2019. Always refer to the manufacturer's installation and maintenance instructions. You can refer to any of those ULC standards. Everybody hopefully knows that all the ULC standards are free, accessible online. You can digitally view, see all the standards. You just have to go to shopulstandards.com and create a username and password if you don't have one, and then search for S531. The standard will come up, and then you can digitally view every page, and you can find the certified products under UL Product IQ. So here's my contact information. This information, I guess I can say, if not everybody may know, will be valid until March 31st. After that, I'll be leaving ULC. I have accepted the position as the full-time fire chief for the township of Russell. So April 1st, I'll be the fire chief. So until the time being, you can contact me until March 31st, and I'd be more than willing to help you on anything. If not, then I can share the customer service, or just go to our website and you can find customer service, and they'll direct you to the new Brian at ULC. So that is the end of my presentation. But Roel, if you permit me, I want to do a case study, because in the last 2 months, I've been getting a lot of questions on a very specific smoke alarm called Xsense. So can I just take 5 minutes? Do I still have time, Roel?
Yeah, you're good. You're good. This is important stuff. So yeah, for sure.
Okay. So in the last 2 months, I've probably had about half a dozen people from Ontario, people from Alberta, Manitoba, and even New Brunswick, and a couple from Quebec. There's a product called Xsense that's on the market, and you can buy it online through many of the online providers or online retailers. And I apologize, I'm looking at a different screen here. So you'll see the good side of my face, I guess. But so the specific questions has come in is specifically to a wireless interconnected model, this XP01W wireless interconnect smoke alarm. And I'm just going to click on it. So it's a wireless connected device. They're also combination smoke and CO. As you see from the pictures here, all the devices, you can use them, pretty good marketing, all that good stuff. There's some videos to watch about their interconnected alarms. This is how they're all talking and so forth. You get your full coverage. So the question came to me was, are they ULC listed? Because the inspectors were having a hard time verifying these. So remember I said UL Product IQ. So if you go to Google, you type in UL Product IQ, you're going to come to this screen. You know, you have to log in and everything like I showed you, but you type the word Xsense. That is the name of the company, right? So we go back, it's Xsense. We should be able to find it. It's XP01. So I'm just doing a general search for the company name. And when I hit enter, I get 0 hits. So, okay, maybe it's like that Google and the Nest thing, right? So then I would go to, okay, let's try the model number XP01. What does that come up with? Okay, so I have 4 hits with XP01, an auxiliary device. It doesn't say smoke alarms certified for Canada. So that's not the model product that I'm looking for. And this Sun Electric. So even if I clicked on auxiliary devices, for example, these are auxiliary types of devices for, I don't know what, but it's definitely not for, foot switches, indicator lights, limit switches. So that is not what we're looking for. So remember I said UL and ULC is not the only certification body for smoke alarms. Intertech, ETL, that you see on smoke alarms also certifies it. So I couldn't put this in my presentation because I'm going outside of UL now. I'm talking to you as Brian, as a fire prevention officer or public educator. Okay, so I'm putting my fire hat on now. So I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to check Intertech certification directory. That's what I want to look for, because I want to see if this device is certified by Intertech. Because if it's not UL, it has to be Intertech. Because at the end of the day, I think I said it earlier, Intertech and UL are the only 2 certification bodies that test smoke alarms in North America. I think there's another one called QAI is getting into it, but the 2 main ones you'll see are ETL and UL. So then you're going to click on the product directory link, and you're going to scroll down until you find ETL listed products right here. You see ETL listed. You click on that, and it brings you to their search engine. So I'm just going to flip screens. Oh, no, I'll still do it here. Okay, and in here, I'm going to type Xsense is the manufacturer that I'm looking for. Oh, perfect. I found some certifications for Xsense. And remember, I need to find out that it's certified to ULC 531, right? That's the key. So they don't say certified for Canada Intertech, so they have a different type of search mechanism, but I'm looking for this 531. Okay, they also have CSA 6.9 here for residential carbon monoxide alarms, but I'm specifically looking at the smoke alarm. I'm going to click on their link. Now they're telling me that they have a single station battery operated photoelectric smoke and carbon monoxide SC01, 02, 03, 04, 06, 07, 08, and a single station battery operated photoelectric model SD01, SD02, SD03, SD4, 6, 7, and 8. What was the product that we were looking for? We were looking for XP01W. XP01W is not showing up here, and it's not showing up here. So you're coming to the conclusion that it is not certified to Canada's requirements of 531. I go back to the smoke alarm. Remember what I showed you before, what has to be on the back of the smoke alarm, all that wording, the certification mark and all that. The very first fire inspector that I was speaking to, I said, do you have pictures of the back of that smoke alarm? And they said, yes. They showed me a picture. We were doing a Teams call. The back of the picture had none of that wording, and it had the CE mark, which is the European self-declaration that it complies with whatever standard it was tested to. That CE mark is not a certification mark acceptable in Canada. So therefore, the model XP01W is not certified to either Canadian or US requirements because it didn't even have the US testing on it. So it's just all to show you that you're looking at a device, just because the manufacturer says they're certified, it gets specific to the models. So if you went to their website, potentially to Xsense, not for this, but it could say UL certified. But there's very specific models that are certified. It's just not a blanket certification. So that's why if you don't see the mark on the back of the product, more than likely it's not certified to the Canadian requirements. Okay. So was I sharing my screen?
Yep, we could.
Oh,
we could
okay.
see.
So you still see the Intertech screen?
Yep.
Okay. I just couldn't tell I was seeing it again. So anyways, that concludes my presentation. And I know I got a few minutes left here to answer some questions. So I apologize if I'm running late here.
Well, it's okay. Thank you very much, Brian. That was lots of information. Obviously something that we think we know a lot about, and then there's still some new stuff. So so it's really, yeah, really good. Thank you for that. So I did write a few things down, some good comments that I think I wanted to share. Some of the questions were, there was one question that said the dates on the side of a smoke alarm. Sometimes it's a sticker, like a fill in the blank. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, so the standard, remember the standard is a minimum requirement. So, and when we're looking at the production line and so forth, and the time from the smoke alarm, especially now, if you've seen some newer smoke alarms, you have to activate them before you put them up because of that end of life. The manufacturer can't put the day saying that when it's going to be expired or the 10-year date, because they don't know when you're going to be activating it. Could sit on a store shelf for 2 years. So the date of activation is when their 10-year, as per their instructions, or the 7-year kicks in. So that's why it's left blank, and it's up to the homeowner to write those dates in when they activate the device, and that is permitted by the standard.
So that begs the question that if it is sitting on the shelf for 2 years, or you know, and then you activate it, put it up, then the sensor, you know, the end of life will actually be 12 years after it was manufactured. Like, is that's I think that's partly where the question comes from, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. So that is permitted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and to everybody, this session is recording, and we are going to edit it and post it on our website, so it's going to be available again, which is great. There was a bit of a discussion on level, story, floor, you know, the different. So the code says story, and I know Laura King was on there from NFPA. The NFPA, from education purposes, would like to use level. It's a little more universally used. And then also people say you have to have one on every floor. So, you know, people were, like you said, we're actually putting them on the floor. So that is not good.
Yeah, so I think I was interacting, I think I was using level and story there, depending.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the first building codes were saying level, and then they moved it to story. So I probably was flipping back and forth between those words. So my apologies.
Yeah, the only time that, like, I'm living in a 4-level split myself. So then is that a 2-story home split in half, you know, with 2 stories, or is it actually 4 level? Like, it's 4 levels. So then do you have to, I mean, I have one on every level, obviously, because, you know, we're in the business, but can you enforce one on every level, or is that a two-story home that really only requires two? That kind of thing. So, and then outside bedrooms, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's a bit of a judgment call when you go into a building too, I think.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
Let's see what else. So the wireless alarms was something that I'm sure lots of people are dealing with. I kind of like the alternative solution. So like when you ask for an alternative solution, do you you go through like the whole rigmarole with engineers and everything, or have you got a bit of a scaled down version for this?
Yeah, so we're following the official process. If they're going through the building department, they have to do it through the official process. On the fire side, I've been a little bit more lenient than going through the whole building code side. I might get myself in trouble someday. And I guess I can look at, we had discussions with NRC, the National Research Council, and their interpretation that they gave out, they said it's subject to the authority having jurisdiction, but their intent was not to limit the technology. Even though they said the word wired in the National Building Code, that was not their intent to limit it. So you're starting to look at some of the changes in the building code now are talking about the wireless kicks in some places for like secondary suites, but not for the base building. I think it will get changed. I haven't seen the changes yet, so I don't think it'll be in the 2025 code. It'll probably be the 2030 code, where I'm pretty sure that wired is going to be going away. And how can we prohibit technology the way it's going, and the reliability? The testing that they're doing in accordance with the standard, they're meeting all the requirements for reliability. So I think you should really have discussions if you're contemplating to permit wireless. Speak to your building department, see how they would permit it under alternative solutions, and then try to piggyback off of that.
That's a good idea. Yeah, because I think it's the fire code that says wired. The building code actually says electrically connected.
Correct.
So it's but
what's electrically connected, right?
So yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can dissect it to that's great. That's what I wrote down. I don't know if anybody else has any more questions. I've been kind of monitoring the question chat there, and the chat as well. So I don't think, I think we've covered everything. Unless somebody else has another question, that would be a great time for that.
I see one from Dan Johnson, an interconnected smoke alarm system S552. Does this not require either an external activation, such as a pull station, or external action, such as a mag hold open device? So when you look at S552, it tells you what an interconnected system is, and I will just pull up the standard quickly, and I believe it does also include for the interconnected system, for those occupancies that need it, I believe it also calls up for a pull station here. Let me double check here. And at worst cases, I can share it and you could pass it along to everybody. The standard the 552 standard -14 applies to the inspection, testing, and maintenance of smoke alarms within dwelling units, as well as sleeping rooms that are not part of a dwelling unit. And then we still have the residential fire warning systems under S540. That could be a whole different presentation for those buildings that don't require a fire alarm system. But yes, I'm pretty sure that pull station is required, but I will get the information and forward it to you, Will, that you can share with the
group. I think maybe and I don't want to speak for Daniel, but so there's the 9541, for 95 buildings, then if the number of dwelling units is not more than 10 and there's not more than 24 people, you're allowed to do, instead of a full-fledged fire alarm system, you're allowed to do a system with interconnected smokes with a pull station. And I'm assuming that's what Daniel is referring to. So then with that,
then that would be kicking in. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I see there's one new message. Rogers home monitoring, are those acceptable smoke alarms?
Rogers home monitoring. So again, you would have to find out what the device is that they're using, right? So we know lots of security systems monitor, you have your base building smoke alarms or your base dwelling unit smoke alarms. They come in and install another smoke alarm connected to the home security system. So you would have to know what that device was. You'd have to take it off, look at it, see if it's got the UL or the Intertech ULC, CUL certification on it. So I'm not sure Rogers offhand what devices they're using, because it may not be a Rogers device. They could be using someone else's device connected to it.
Yeah, and we've had some experience with these too, where security systems offer that service for fire monitoring. If you don't specify to them what you want, they will put one smoke detector as part of their system. Well, this is one I spoke to often. They put it in the basement because they figured the basement is where fires mostly start, or kitchen, whichever one they do. But bottom line is that they don't offer the amount of smoke alarms or smoke detectors that you would need throughout the whole house as per the fire code. So that's something you have to keep in mind, and homeowners may not ask that question, and they may just think that because they are monitored by this security company that they're good to go. And then it turns out that sometimes they may not be. So.
And you have to remember, I saw Vince put in that the ones that he saw, they're not smoke alarms, they're smoke detectors.
Right.
Right. So again, obvious, consider this to be above and beyond the base building requirements of smoke alarms. And it would have, if it is a smoke detector, it still has to comply with ULC 526, I think it is, which is the smoke detector, or 528. No, 529, I think. So it has to comply with 529. And what'll happen is Health Canada also says that those devices that are for residential use, i.e. the smoke detector, has to be certified to the applicable standard, which is that 529 standard. So you still need a certified device connected to it.
Great. Yeah, I think it's 10 to 11 now, so I'd like to give Emily some time too. Great questions, everybody, and yeah, obviously tons of good information. Brian, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us this morning.
And then the last question said those devices can't be replaced to replace a smoke alarm. That is correct, because you still need your smoke alarms, unless that smoke detector has a sounder base that could then provides the audible. But in general, no, it would not be permitted. You still need your base building smoke alarms, unless there's a full fire alarm system in the building. But feel free to contact me if you want more information. And over to you, Emily. I'll stop talking.
I know it's lots. Yeah, there are lots of questions like that. So thank you very much, Brian. So in the interest of time, I think Emily has about 15 or 20 minutes worth of information, which would be great. So I don't really want to take a break. We'll just we'll get going right through, if that's okay. So Emily Falco, are you with us, Emily?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, good. So Emily Falco is the Distribution Center Supervisor for the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council. She's been there since September of 2022. It's located in Brockville, Ontario. Previously, she was the retail store manager for Michael's Arts and Crafts for 8 years. So Emily, I'll leave this up to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here. Just let me know when you can see it. Oh, goodness. Okay. Can you see anything there yet?
Not yet. I made sure that I did just check. You are still co-host, so you should have the authority or permission to share your screen. So
Okay, I think I might be good. There we go.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, so that's going to be a hard one to follow up with on Brian. So thanks so much, Brian. That was a great presentation. Lots of information, very informative, very detailed. So thank you for that. I will not take up nearly as much of your time. I know I'm kind of slated for 15 to 20 minutes, so I will do my best to make that work. I definitely will not go over my time. So feel free to jump in with any questions, comments during this presentation. Okay, so want to start off with just kind of an introduction and or reintroduction on the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council. For those of you that are not overly familiar with us or haven't used us very much here in the past. So we'll kind of start off with our mandate. The council's mandate, as outlined in the provincial 1997 FPPA, states that we promote fire safety throughout the province, produce and distribute materials for public education with respect to fire safety, provide and or endorse training, education, and fire prevention activities, facilitate and coordinate the public exchange of information and ideas on matters of fire safety, enter into partnerships and agreements with persons or organizations in the private sector or with public bodies or organizations, advise the fire marshal on matters of fire safety. So with all of that said, the council will continue to work collaboratively with its partners and stakeholders to promote fire safety in the province. This will be achieved through the ongoing design of public education materials, with careful attention being paid to aligning its messaging with the fire marshal, the Office of the Fire Marshal, and the overall collaboration that occurs on flagship campaigns throughout Ontario. In addition, the council will explore partnership opportunities to assist in enhancing the fire safety messages in Ontario and delivering on its mandate through key industry partners who also share the same values in keeping Ontario fire safe. I don't think too many people are aware of this, but when COVID first broke out, everything was shut down and the entire Ontario Fire Marshal had no way to rapidly distribute important PPE to protect firefighters from the COVID exposure during all emergency calls. When the OFM turned to the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council Distribution Center in Brockville to immediately ship PPE to over 440 provincial fire departments throughout Ontario. When you support the Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council, you support the Ontario Fire Service. We've recently launched a new website. I'm not sure if many of you have been on our website. It looks fantastic. It's a lot more modernized. However, with this new launch, we are experiencing a few glitches with our system. So please be patient with us while we work through these challenges that we are experiencing. Has anyone had the opportunity to get onto the new website? No. Okay. I wanted to put in a couple slides here with our top 5 selling alarms. So this is kind of based on last year's sales as well as where we're at for the first couple months of 2023. So as you can see, we do have a couple different options in here. We have a few combo alarms as well as a smoke alarm, and you've got your basic CO alarm and a few more combo alarms in there as well. Following that up with our top 5 selling books, of course, we have the Essentials of Firefighting 7th edition, Hazardous Materials First Responders 5th edition, Company Officers 6th edition, Fire Instructor 9th edition, Pumping Apparatus Driving an Operator Handbook 3rd edition. So I wanted to put this in here, and this was just to kind of follow up on the survey that we released in the fall of 2022. A lot of departments sent back feedback with regards to actual safety items that we carry, or lack thereof. So, and that was mostly geared towards vehicle safety. So we kind of brainstormed and came up with a few, well, 2 items actually, that we thought would be beneficial in the unfortunate event of a fire emergency in a vehicle. So with those, we've come up with a glass breaker, or it could be a small hammer for cars, as well as a seat belt cutter. So we're in the process of production for these items, and these will be released in 2023. So you can keep an eye out for those on the website, as well as within our upcoming kits. I think we're looking at fire prevention kit for the seatbelt cutter, and the glass breaker will be introduced as a new item that we're offering. We also got some feedback with regards to new and exciting kids items. So with that, we've kind of taken it back to a few years back to when I was a kid, and we're introducing the parachute person. So this is going to be offered in a few different nice and bright neon colors. As you can see, we have pictures of both. Of course, like I said, the seatbelt cutter as well as the glass breaker, those are in production. So these are just to kind of give you an idea of what we're working on. And they will, of course, have some safety messaging associated with those as well. So those are just to kind of name a few items that we're working on behind the scenes. Up and coming, we're also working on some senior and older and wiser kits. Of course, we know seniors are a real risk factor. So we thought that kind of introducing a kit designed and geared towards the older population would be very beneficial for that. So we're in the process of these, but again, we'll take any feedback that you feel would be important to put into those specific kits. And we're hoping to have something like this out towards the end of the year as well. We don't really have anything associated for pets at the moment, so we're working on getting some decals for windows and doors out right now as well, in the event of an emergency. So the firefighters will know what they're looking for when they're coming into their homes. We've also introduced some new and improved kitchen items. So again, keep an eye out for those. Those will be launching this year as well. We're hoping to put out a Christmas parade kit. So again, this is just kind of in the works, stuff that we're working on behind the scenes. So feedback is welcome. If you feel like there's anything that you would like to see in any of these kits, please let us know. And we'll do our very best to get some of those ideas out into the world for you. I think we're working on some door hangers as well, and not just in English and French. So we're working on having a few different languages associated with some of these new public education items that we're getting out there as well. And one thing that I know Jamie's working on behind the scenes is working closely with First Nations and their communities. Another big item that we're in the process of getting out there right now as well is going to be this custom sized, life-size inflatable house. So this would be something that you could have up for your departments for open houses, any trade shows that you might be running for your departments. But we're sourcing these for you essentially. So it's going to be an easy process that essentially saves you time and money in the long run. So what we would ask, if this is something that you're interested in, to send us info for your quote, and then we'll send this off to our distributor. Essentially, they will manufacture and put that together based on your ideas that you're wanting associated with this house. So you could do your own fire messaging, your department logo, anything basically that you're wanting added to this house is something that we can curate for you. So we would put all that information together, send that off for you, and then the manufacturer will produce that and ship that directly to you. So at the end of the day, we'll cover the brokerage's costs as well as the customs fees or issues associated with that. I believe we have one in the works right now for a department that Jamie is working closely with. So more to come on that. But again, any questions or concerns you have with this specific item or anything that I've just mentioned, please let me know and I can get you information as needed. We're working on reintroducing a new mascot. And the special thanks and shout out goes to Sarah at the Tillsonburg Fire Department for sending out this idea. So again, an easy process designed to save you money and time in the long run. Just send us your quote and any information that you want associated with this. And this is something that we can put together for you. So looking ahead, partnerships with corporations who want to work together and prevent fire and or carbon monoxide related deaths by rolling out new and innovative partnerships to help Ontario Fire Departments spread the safety message to the public. New and innovative campaigns to reach all the high-risk communities and individuals and protect them from fire through education. Larger Fire Marshal's Public Fire Safety Council meetings to act as liaisons to all parties in fire prevention and education, safety, to develop new programs to reach the broader public. Ideas from you and your team on new items or educational pieces that you can use while interacting with the public. So what we ask of you is, like I just mentioned, is we welcome your ideas. If there's something that you're thinking and you're not sure how that you can put that together, we want you to send it to us so we can work with that idea and get it out there into the public. At the end of the day, making it easier for you so you don't have to worry about, well, where am I going to get that from, or how do I put that together? Let us do the work for you. Questions? I know that, what was that, 10 minutes? I've got what, 15 and 20, but that kind of wraps that up. I know I'm a very fast talker, so I'll have to work on slowing that down. But that's just kind of gives you an idea of what we're working on behind the scenes. It's a very busy little distribution center, and we've got lots of great ideas that we're working on for you guys, just to make it easier, more modern, more exciting at the end of the day. We're really working on ramping up some of the kits that we have, again, based on the feedback that we've received from the departments and, through those surveys that we've released as well. So, yeah, that's kind of where we're at the DC right now.
That's great. Thank you, Emily. Lots of different products out there and fully customizable things. That's really good. It's nice to see, all the different things that you have available. I'm not sure how many departments really, utilize the council to its capabilities and great, the ending with that as well, like great ideas, let's share them and let's make them a provincial thing. So yeah, thank you very much for this presentation, and packed a lot of information in that.
Yes.
So
if there's any questions, I can also send out my my contact info. That way, if there's anything based on what I've just discussed, you can shoot me an email or a phone call, and I can give you more information.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds great. Let's see the chat here. It's there is one question in the chat. I think it seems like there's a lot of information for sale or handout. This is messaging the best way, or boots on the ground, visiting schools and communities, meetings, etc. better. Is there a study that shows that these items presented does better than educating people? I mean, I think like a combination, obviously she's good, like, boots on the ground is definitely something we need to keep on doing. And I think, like, to me, a lot of these items help with that. That house is um, a great thing too. And I know we have something similar to that, or probably not the same one, but doesn't take that long to set up and,
For sure. And one of the nice things about this house is it's ADA approved, right? So for any persons in wheelchairs or crutches, anything like that, it's stable enough and sturdy enough that they're able to walk through that, right? So yeah.
Yeah, we set up ours at the Fire Prevention Week open house, and it was well received. It's
Oh,
great.
great.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. Like I said, it might not be the same one, but it's definitely a
Similar, yeah.
similar one. Yeah. So, are there any other questions? I don't see any in the question and answer one, and there's one more in the chat, but I think it's still for Brian. So thank you very much, Emily, and Brian as well, for filling our morning with lots of good information.
Awesome. Thank you.
It's highly appreciated.
Stop sharing that. There we go.
Yeah. So that concludes our training for this one for February.